Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and I have a cold, and I apologize up front, but I couldn't really wait because I love this time of year, and it is time for my most surprising reads of 2019. I previously did my two more negative videos, the worst and most disappointing reads, and now we're ending the year with some good ones. So, these are not necessarily the ultimate best books of the year for me, but this is something where maybe it would just sounded even mildly interesting, or maybe I read it just because it fulfilled a prompt on a readathon, and I was super surprised by what I got out of this book. So let's jump right in. The first up in no particular order is The Killer Collective by Barry Eisler. This is a political thriller which isn't usually talked about on BookTube, but is kind of a guilty pleasure genre of mine. And this one in particular is all about a woman who is working to uncover this essentially child molestation ring and finds out that someone in the government really doesn't want her looking into it, and there's a hit or an attempt on her life. She escapes it and kind of asks for some help from these trained killers, more or less, to figure out how high this goes and how to take it down to end the ring for good. Now, that's pretty standard for the most part. I did like that the one kind of leading with the agency was a woman. That's not common enough in political thrillers, but I was surprised by just how much diversity there was in this. For example, the lead character is a Thai woman who was a victim of sex trafficking, and miracle of miracles, it remains her story. No women were fridged in this making. It was all about her overcoming, and the reason she went after things like child pornography rings and rapists was because of her own past. So her past was hers. It was her agency. It was her story, and I love that, and really needs to come around more in political thrillers because some of the most fridging happens in that genre. But also there were other things, like we had a man who was, I believe, half Japanese. My personal favorite was the big bad badass character they called the Angel of Death, is a gay man and has, I believe it was just a boyfriend. You don't get to see him a lot, and I kind of low-key want to look through the rest of the series to see if I can't find where that relationship happens, because I feel like I would love that book. But regardless, the only thing that kept it from being an ultimate woke book was the fact that we had two female characters that hated each other on sight, so demerit for that. But it was a great, fantastic group vibe. Our main character, who was a victim of sex trafficking, acts very realistically. She is neither both perfectly okay because of it, but neither is she totally devastated, and I love that take. I actually got this book for free off of Amazon First Reads. If you actually have Amazon Prime, you get a pick of one of 6 ebooks each month. And granted, the picks aren't always the best, but you can find some good ones occasionally. And I ended up reading this for a readathon not required, an action-packed book, I think was the prompt. So it was kind of just this one looks cool, I got it for free. It's, for a good readathon, and I ended up absolutely adoring it. So that's how that works. Up next is the indie book that I can't shut up about, and that is Our Bloody Pearl by D.N. Bryn. I got this for free off BookBub, and again, it fit a prompt, I believe, for the Book Junkie Trials, if I remember correctly. I think I needed something that was piratey, and this book fit the bill, and I adore it. I am constantly suggesting it. So this is all about a siren named Pearl. Well, I guess they are named Pearl by the humans they come in contact with, who has been in the essentially capture of this evil pirate captain. Another pirate captain comes to free them, and they're not entirely sure if they can trust this pirate captain, but they don't really have another choice because due to captivity, their tail is disabled, and they basically can't live in the ocean on their own. Now, if you couldn't tell from my pronouns, our main character is either non-binary or gender queer. It's never really fully said because the sirens in this book can basically change their equipment at will, but I think it's supposed to be non-binary because literally none of them ever go by any gendered pronouns, and our protagonist is actually kind of confused why humans seem to be so obsessed with who is a she and who is a he. But it's a very, very heart-wrenching tale dealing with Pearl struggling with their newfound disability, and are they still a siren if they can't swim on their own in the ocean? We have some lovely, my favorite trope, the short, spunky steampunk mechanic that I love. We have WLW romance, we have ace representation in an ace romance, and some awesome like battles on a stormy sea with like sirens versus humans, and the humans are trying to like hunt the sirens, and the sirens are trying to tear the humans apart. And it's all, I love it. It's so good. And there's, I believe, a full series coming. I think the author said there's a fourth gonna come out eventually, but even though like the sequel hasn't come out yet, and I'm kind of dying inside, and I really want it to come out. And again, I just needed a pirate book for a readathon, and I got this one for free, and like it's so good. I love it so much. It would have been on probably my best of the year if it hadn't been such a surprise. So technically, it fits better on this list, although it could have very well made like a top 10 or a top 5 best of the year entirely. Up next was a book I read fairly early this year, and that is The Girls at 17 Swan Street by Yara Jeeb. This is a contemporary, kind of like poetically written prose story all about a young woman who is put into a group home for those struggling with eating disorders. I believe her name is Anna. Yes, and she has anorexia, and it's very blunt and almost uncomfortable at times how she sees her anorexia, because like she knows she has it, but she doesn't see it as a problem, and basically she talks about how, oh, I can control it, it's on me, and it's one of those reads that is very uncomfortable and you want to scream, no, you're sick, at the protagonist, but that's kind of the point. I'm not sure if this is totally on Voices. I remember the letter I got with it, because I won this from a raffle off of Bookish First, talked about how the authors had experience with it, and I don't know if that was supposed to be personal experience or like professional, like working as like a therapist with, I'm not sure which, but it definitely is very raw. It's definitely very much a struggle. There's not a perfect happy ending, but again, it kind of fits in with the story. And I actually ended up lending this to my mom because she wanted it so much, and I only recently got it back, but she agrees. It's a fantastic read. It's one of those books where you might not want to read it twice, but you're grateful you read it the first time. And I, for one, am so glad I won this off of the raffle. And it wasn't even like the one that I originally wanted. I think I entered the raffle for like this one, and was it Gilded Wolves too? I don't remember. But there was another book that I entered in, and I really wanted that one, and this one was like my backup because I just really wanted a free book. And I'm so glad this one was my backup because it was such a good read. So yes, very surprising. Would highly recommend. Obviously, trigger warnings for like eating disorders and stuff. So if you're recovering from that or struggling with that, you might want to be careful. I'm not sure how triggers with eating disorders work, but if you want to look into the mind of someone struggling with an eating disorder like anorexia, this is a fantastic pick. Up next was a book I talked about recently in my Indie-December wrap-up, and it was a surprise that I mentioned before, and that is LMS Layer by A.W. Exley. This was, again, a book I got for free off BookBub, and I honestly don't remember why I picked it up. I think it was like one of those cases of I just needed like a palate cleanser, and this seemed schlocky enough to me. I think that was it. Regardless, this is all about a Cinderella retelling in Edwardian England just after the First World War, aka the Great War, and our young protagonist Eleanor is struggling with her father, who is technically still alive, but as a result of head trauma suffered in the Great War, is comatose. He's basically a vegetable, although he can breathe on his own. And there's now zombies. Zombies broke out, and I loved how much this was set in its place. This is a result of, you know, men coming home with shell shock, or what was then called shell shock, and they don't want to keep fighting when they got home. They just got off the killing field, and now they have to fight when they get back. And of course we have our young princess character, but more than anything, I loved that Eleanor, our Cinderella, is quite literally a slayer. She takes down the zombies, and there's all of this themes of, are they still human in there? Is she giving up her soul to be in there? but she's very adept at it. She's very like competent at what she does, and I love that. I've mentioned before, but I think Cinderella tends to be the character, even in retellings, with the least agency in her stories. It's so much about the fact that she's being saved from a bad situation by a man. So to have her be the one to be like, I'm gonna go kill zombies and maybe fall in love with this rich dude along the way, but also kill zombies. I loved it so much. I believe this is in an episode of Best Worst Indie Books at some point on my channel. But again, free off BookBub. I just wanted like a palate cleanser from something else I'd been reading at the time, and I picked this at random, and I'm really glad I did. It surprised the hell out of me, and I love it. And speaking of books got free off BookBub that I read just for a palate cleanser, the last one on my list is Bless Her Dead Heart by Meg Collette. I was supposed to be reading another book for the final prompt in a Witchathon readathon. Then I tried reading that book, and I discovered that I really couldn't read that book, but I still wanted to finish the book in 2 days. So I went through, saw the cover looked cool, and I thought, sure, why not? And I ended up loving it. This is all about a young woman named Loie who is very traumatized and caught by things that happened to her in her past, specifically in high school, and the things she did in retaliation. And when she was also in high school, she discovered the dead body of one of her classmates in a very gruesome fashion. Our story begins with her discovering yet another body in that same gruesome fashion years later, and she's afraid that whatever creepy, mysterious, occult force that killed her old friend has come back. And at the same time, a new man has come into this small southern town. Is he related in all this nonsense? It was very creepy. It was very set in its place. There was so many mentions of sweet tea, and I know I've said that before, but it had the greatest ambiance, and the actual reveal of what did those things was very disturbing and creepy, and I loved it. There was also a delightful romance that has a lot of bumps, but not like those generic, we could get over this if we could just communicate. No, like there's genuine, like, we need to resolve this in some way relationship bumps. There is some MLM representation, although I'm really hoping that it is more in future installments. This is the first in a series. And also a quick warning for trigger warnings or content warnings, whatever we're calling them now, for rape and sexual assault. Nothing is super in depth, but it definitely lets you know what happened in no uncertain terms, so be on the lookout for that. But I loved Loie. She was adorable. I would really recommend this one if you like horror, but like set in a culture. It's very good. If you don't like horror, you probably won't like this one, because again, that thing was just anyway. So those are my 5 most surprising reads of 2019. I love doing that. I love just like walking into a library or picking a book off BookBub and just being like, what's this? And you suddenly end up loving it. That's probably one of my favorite things about reading, and about reading a lot, like a very wide variety, is you never know what's going to catch your attention. So if you've had any really surprising reads that maybe you weren't expecting to be as fantastic as they were, please let me know in the comments down below. I'd love some more stories of, I didn't mean to, but then this happened and I loved it. So thank you so much for watching this. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.